Hello everybody, Maddox here. Got another classic tabletop knife review for you right here, right now. Feel free to subscribe at that little bell notification if you do not want to miss weekly knife and gear videos. Thank you so much for watching. Support me on Patreon, link in the description. Let's get started. This is the CRKT Apoc, model number 5380. This knife is badass. It's really, really cool. Immediately attracted me as soon as I saw it. Wasn't too sure if I wanted it or not. I did think it was very cool, very unique, very interesting looking, and I really, really am a fan of it. Let's get the specs out of the way first. As always, according to CRKT's official website, we have a blade length of 3.98 inches, handle length of 5.1 inches, with the overall length they are saying is 9 inches? According to my calculations, that should be 9.08 inches. Let's try to measure this with my crappy old ruler right here. It's not a digital one, sorry, but we can at least see. Okay, actually, it looks like it is closer to 9. It's definitely not over 9 inches. I mean, this is kind of a crude way to measure it, I know, but so something's off there. Blade length looks like it's just under 4. Just a hair. Maybe it is 4. They're saying at 3.98. And then our handle here, again, crudely, is just about 5. They were saying 5.1. It looks like it looks like more like 5. So I don't know where the 5.1 came from. Maybe that is a typo. More or less, it's about 9 inches overall length, about a 4-inch blade, about a 5-inch handle. So it's very large. I consider it a large size folder. Again, 4 inches to me will always be large. Anything above that is extra large. Anything below that is medium and such and such. Weighs 6.2 ounces according to their website. But again, we're going to have to verify that if you know me. Because oftentimes, a lot of the websites are not correct on their weights. I don't know what it is. Sometimes they're way off. If you watch my previous videos, you probably know that. 6.19 ounces is what my scale is saying. Again, they were saying 6.2. So actually, that's pretty close. I'm going to give them that. Retails at $89.99. We have an 8CR13 MOV blade steel. They call it a stone wash. I call it a black wash finish. G10 handle scales. Technically, it is a frame lock. We will talk about that. On this stainless, I'm also going to call this a black wash design, little backspacer, really sexy, rigid backspacer back here. I really like that. I think it's really cool. Tip up, carry, loop over, pocket clip, little skeletonization there. Not swappable to the left side. Sorry, lefties. Almost. It is a flipper-only knife. There is no thumb stud on there. IKBS system, so it flies out every single time. No wrist movement needed whatsoever, even with a damn good lockup. Very, very strong. Yeah, it's good. Very solid. Solid lock. It's not the strongest I've ever felt, but it's strong enough, just like you would expect. Most frame locks, liner locks in general, these days, their timings are good, so they're fine. And again, that IKBS just lets it fly out of the handle. You can really hear that lockup. It's actually a very nice, solid feeling knife. And I know it's just because it's a metal frame lock. There's even cheap frame locks out there that feel like good knives, but it could also be the weight, 6 ounces, just above 6 ounces is on the heavier side for a knife, even with a 4-inch blade. So it is slightly heavy, but the heft and the steel material just make it feel like a very high-quality knife. I know you knife guys know exactly what I am talking about. Even cheaper knives that are made of metal, they feel, and they're heavy. People who are knife noobs or don't know much about them to begin to pick it up, like, whoa, what a good quality knife. It has a nice feel to it. It's like 11 ounces. They can barely lift it. It does have a coolness factor. This knife is definitely a cool, interesting, unique knife as far as its style goes. It's very, very cool looking. Again, it's called the Apoc. The idea is that it's post-apocalyptic. That's sort of the theme we're going on here. Is the designer's name. You can see the hammer work done on the metal frame right here, almost called the scales. Technically, the G10 slabs right here are the scales. This would be the frame, hence frame lock. And then you can see some almost filing work done on the blade as well. Don't know exactly how they do it, but very interesting pattern. Almost mimics like lava seeping. That's the first thing I think of. I know that's not what it's supposed to be, but it's supposed to look like a knife that was kind of rummaged together with scraps and parts that were left over from old guns and tanks and whatever happened in post-apocalyptic U.S. Earth tones, like the dark gray. I call this a black wash finish. It's tumbled, it's stone wash, but it's darkened as well. Really think it's sexy. It's very beautiful. I love stone wash finishes. I love black wash finishes even more most of the time. This is absolutely gorgeous. Love the finish on there. You can see that tumbled look it has. I've said this before, but stonewash finishes functionally are better than a lot of other finishes out there because it's harder to scratch them. It's harder for them to wear. They're very smooth. It's harder for them to corrode or rust, and they're cheap. It's very cheap to stonewash a knife. It's not a very expensive finish at all, and functionally, it ends up being a lot better than most other economy finishes out there, including satin. We have a nice Coyote brown handle scale right here for the G10, which is relatively grippy, medium traction. It's kind of like a Spyderco Tenacious, Kershaw Skyline, the typical stuff, not super grippy or anything. It's just grippy enough to compensate for the fact that it would otherwise be an all-metal knife. Now, I call this a frame lock. I would not call this a liner. That is the frame of the knife itself because it mimics the exact opposite side right here, and these scales are added on afterward. Although you could say the same thing for a liner lock, technically, but it is kind of a gray area. I'm going to call this a frame lock. It just happens to have added scales on it. If you've ever had the CRKT Fossil, another great knife, very similar knife, very similar price point, very similar designs, same blade steel. If you like the Fossil, you will like this one too, I assume. Very similar in a lot of ways. It functions very similarly. Materials are almost identical, although the design's a little bit different. There's very stylistic knives. So the closest knife I can think of is that one. But again, this is what I would call a frame lock. And again, it's black washed on there. Your grip itself kind of helps strengthen the lock. It's slightly exposed there, as you can see. So as I grip down on this, it is going to help enforce that lock just a little bit. Not as much as a fully exposed frame lock would, but it's already strong as it is. This sets it even over the top. So it's a strong lock overall. I like this dip we have here for your thumb. As you can see, thumb lands right there. It's designed very well. Not the absolute most ergonomic knife in the world, but it's ergonomic enough. No crazy choils or anything like that. But it's a very versatile design, but just curved enough to fit the human hand. Again, my large size hands, for a glove reference there, fits just fine. It's not terribly uncomfortable or anything. This may be a hot spot after a while because they are fully exposed stainless liners, or the frame rather right here. They're slightly rounded, but not that much. It is pretty squared off. So it might be a hot spot after a while. It's not too sharp or anything, but it's certainly not rounded all the way either. I love that Backspacer. Backspacer is just so cool. And this one in particular is a cool design. Little lanyard hole right there. It is cut nice and crisp with the G10 scale. Pretty okay fit and finish. Except these body screws right here that screw into the Backspacer are obstructed by the scale right there. So that is not a great fit and finish. I would say it's slightly off. Little black stop pin. Now this blade style right here, it's almost a Wharncliffe. It's not a true Wharncliffe. It's not completely flush, but it's a sheep's foot. It's kind of its own thing. Modified sheep's foot, I guess you would put that. Interesting. Very, very interesting blade right here. Just enough belly for most EDC tasks and doing... it's funny to me when a lot of people bring up food prep. I don't know why you would use a folding knife for food prep. I have kitchen knives for that, but even though this shape is almost like a Santoku blade, other than all the crazy crap happening up here, functionally speaking, it's a lot like a Santoku kitchen knife. But we have a flipper in the way. The guard/flipper is going to obstruct the cutting unless you're at the end of a table and this is not on the surface of the table. It's kind of a tricky knife to food prep with. I wouldn't even bother, but you could. It's kind of like a Santoku. So it's going to be good for chopping. It's going to be good for slashing. Okay for piercing. It's not a great tip on there. It's not very acute. It's kind of wide, actually. So we have a strong tip, but it's not going to be great at piercing. It's not the most versatile blade in the world. It is somewhat niche. We have decent side traction here. It's not the most traction-y knife in the world. There's no jimping up here to compensate for the fact that it's all metal. I like this pod clip. Very simple, very covert. I love the colors. Again, the earth tones on here are beautiful. It's a very cool, good-looking knife. 8 CR13 MOV blade steel. You can get these for about $56 in the aftermarket, about $60 on the higher end, I would say. Is that worth it? As far as the blade steel goes, as far as full function goes, it's a little expensive for what you were getting. That is somewhat due to the materials and the style of this knife. All the work put into the aesthetics of this knife is kind of what drives its price. So functionally, it's not the best knife ever, although it does have a good lockup. It does deploy very quickly, very easily, very solidly, carries very well, but it is a little bit heavy, even for the length you are getting. Yes, you're getting a very long ass blade right here, so that's good and all, but it's a little bit heavy for what you're getting. The blade steel's slightly below what you could get for the money out there in the aftermarket. It's not the most versatile. There's no thumb, so it's a flipper only. and doesn't have the best traction, although it has okay traction because of the G10 handle scales on the frames. It's a very stylistic, cool knife, but you're really going to have to like these aesthetics right here in order to pull the trigger on it. It's not the greatest knife in the world. Again, it is stylistic. It's meant to be a stylistic folder, so we are sacrificing some function for its form. But it's not bad. It's actually okay. Would you use this knife in a self-defense situation? Yes, you could, I think. I absolutely think you can. We have enough side traction here. It'll pull out of the pocket just good enough. It deploys very quickly, very readily. You don't even have to think. You just pop that sucker out with your index finger right there so easily. It deploys very well, good lockup. And once it is in this grip right here, once you're holding on to it, I like how we have somewhat of a cutout right here for your fingers. It's not going to get knocked out very easily, I don't think. And especially with that garter there, you can do a thrust attack, etc. Lot to hold on to. Long knife overall. So on top of that, because it is a little bit heavier and you have some metal, you can use this as a non-lethal impact tool, perhaps. There's a handful of other things you can do with it defensively. So although it is stylistic, it is actually just functional enough for me to not recommend it. Again, for the price, or slightly cheaper, $15, $20 cheaper even in some cases. Yeah, you can get a knife a little bit lighter. You can get a knife with possibly a slightly better blade steel. ATR13 MOV is a good blade steel, but it's not great. It is cheap. It keeps costs down. But again, close to the $60 price point for this knife. You'd expect maybe $40 for something with ATR13 MOV with this size at the most, maybe. But you're spending a little bit more than that. Let's just recap everything. Carries very well, extracts out of the pocket very well, deploys very, very well, like a dream, feels so smooth, so fast, feels higher quality than it really is. Okay blade steel on here, you know, for the money you could do better, but it is what it is. We have just enough side traction here for me to put it into the tactical use, although it's not optimal for any particular use, it is good enough at all of them, I think. So that is it. That is the Apoc by CRKT, another very interesting knife from them. Really like this one. It's really cool. It is very stylistic. It is a bit niche, but you know what? It's functional enough for everyday tasks as well as defensive tasks. Yes, I went there. For defense, I think this knife is good enough, actually, despite it being very stylistic. So that's it. CRKT Apoc. Really cool knife. Love it.